Yeah, we're going to be discussing today what, in many ways, is the most important issue when it comes to immigration. Our discussion will be based, as Mark said, on a report published by the Center for Immigration Studies last week. Almost all the information in the report comes from government data collected in October of this year, and it's all available at our website. The data show that the total immigrant population, that's legal and illegal, is now nearly 50 million, which is 15% of the total U.S. population. Both the number and the percentage are record highs in American history, as Mark said. Just to be clear, we've never been here before as a country. No government survey or census has ever shown such a high immigrant share of the population. Now, the enormous scale of immigration obviously has implications for nearly every aspect of American society, from public coffers and the labor market to our culture and our politics. The government typically refers to immigrants as the foreign-born, which includes everyone who is not a U.S. citizen at birth. Now, I'll use the word immigrant and foreign-born interchangeably in my talk. The above numbers that we just discussed come from the monthly survey done by the Census Bureau for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is often referred to as the Household Survey. While it may be surprising to some, both the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics are quite clear that illegal immigrants are included in the data, though some are missed, of course. The data show that from January of 2021, when President Biden took office, to October of 2023, the foreign-born increased by 4.5 million. Put a different way, on average, the foreign-born has grown by 137,000 each month since the start of the Biden presidency. This is roughly triple the average increase during Trump's time in office before COVID hit. So it's enormous. The numbers also double what it was per month growth averaged on for President Obama. Let's put up figure 1 and take a look at that. Now, all the figures we'll show during this discussion are in the new report, which again is available at our website. The numbers in that figure are even more striking when you consider that growth in the foreign-born represents net increase, not the number of newcomers. All births in the United States, including those to illegal immigrants, can only add to the U.S.-born population by definition. So the foreign-born can only grow from new arrivals. But new arrivals are always offset by everyone who goes home each year, which is not trivial, and by natural mortality. Since January of 2021, emigration, the people who leave, and deaths had to total at minimum 1.5 million, given the overall size of the immigrant population. Therefore, for the foreign-born to grow 4.5 million, at least 6 million new immigrants had to have settled in the United States, legally and illegally, in just the last 34 months. This increase has been so fast that it appears to have made the new Census Bureau population projections, which just came out on November 9th of this year, obsolete. The Bureau projected that the foreign-born share was not supposed to hit 15% until 2033. Let's put up figure 2 from the report, or the third figure, I should say. The 15% shown in October of this year is higher than the prior records of 14.8% in 1890 and 14.7% in 1910. During what is typically referred to as the last great wave of immigration. Now, restrictive legislation in the 20s and even World War I before that caused the foreign-born to fall significantly. And then the law was changed in 1965 to allow in more immigrants. But even in 1970, as the figure shows, the foreign-born were still less than 5% of the population. Since then, the share of the population that is foreign-born has more than tripled, and numerically, it has quintupled. As I said, we've never been here before. Now, the long-term growth in the foreign-born since 1970 has been mostly due to legal immigration. the so-called green card. Immigration itself tends to build on itself. As the legal immigrant population grew, immigrants sponsored more relatives overseas. In the 1970s, new green cards averaged about 400,000 a year, and now it's up to about 1 million a year as ever more immigrants are able to sponsor more relatives. The law was also changed in 1990 to allow in more people as well. Now, illegal immigration has grown right along with it. In fact, many illegal immigrants come to join their legal friends and family who are already here. As a result, many of the top sending countries for legal immigration are also the top sending countries for illegal immigration. In many ways, illegal immigration is partly driven by the scale of legal immigration. Now, there was an amnesty for illegal immigrants back in 1986. We gave green cards to 2.7 million illegal immigrants. But because the law was never enforced thereafter, we replaced that population pretty quickly. Now, there is general agreement, but not unanimity, that the illegal population was roughly stable, maybe declined some, between 2010 and 2019 at 10 to 12 million people. Now, this is an important point, and I think it confuses a lot of people. Rough stability in the illegal population in no way means that new illegal immigrants weren't coming. Between 2010 and 2019, it has to be the case that at least 4 million, maybe 5 million new illegal immigrants settled in the United States. But that number was offset by the illegal immigrants who went home, the illegal immigrants who got deported, the illegal immigrants who legalized, such as when an illegal immigrant marries an American or wins the visa lottery or gets asylum. So those numbers are substantial. And of course, just natural mortality among illegal immigrants. Every year, it's a population of over 10 million. There has to be roughly 50,000 deaths each year. So it is not the case that rough stability in the immigrant population or the illegal population is an indication that no one is coming. Now, when COVID hit in 2020, it's likely that the overall immigrant population fell. We can't say by how much because there's problems with the data, but legal immigration was largely shut down and illegal immigration was likely much lower, so that we think that the numbers did fall. But by January of 2021, the numbers were back to where they were in terms of the overall foreign-born to what they had been before the pandemic hit. Now, since January 21, the numbers have exploded, and illegal immigration does account for a lot of the increase. There's been a record number of border encounters. This is when someone tries to slip past the Border Patrol between ports of entry or presents themselves at a port of entry, but is an inadmissible alien. That is, they have no legal right to enter, but they're asking to enter anyway. Now, the Biden administration has released about 2.7 million people into the United States. These are the so-called inadmissible aliens. Technically, I know it seems strange, they're actually not considered to have been formally admitted to the United States, and as such, they're all subject to deportation, though DHS is choosing not to deport them. And so they're allowed to stay. Many times it's because they have an asylum application or some other immigration status, but they are not formally been admitted. And so that has created an enormous increase in the foreign-born. Now, a big reason why the number of people showing up at the border has exploded was due to the president's campaign promises to end Trump administration policies. Chief among them was the Remain in Mexico policy, which is formally known as the Migration Protection Protocols. Now, that had begun in January 2019 to deal with another surge of asylum applications. Now, since the vast majority of asylum applicants simply wish to be released in the United States, they don't really qualify for asylum, requiring people to wait in Mexico for an asylum interview, which is what the protocols did, significantly curtailed applications. Now, it is important to understand that unlike in decades past, the vast majority of people caught at the border are not from Mexico and can't simply be returned to that country. Now, the administration could have used various procedures to send people back quickly. One is called expedited removal. It could have held many of them in detention before the numbers got too big as they awaited their court date. But again, the administration chose to do that. Now, once it became clear that the administration was not going to hold people, was not going to make them wait in Mexico, and was not going to use expedited removal, then the numbers exploded as ever more people came to apply for asylum in the hopes that they too would be released into the United States with some far-off court date, which is now a decade from now. That's how backed up the immigration courts are. Now, in addition to those who have been released, there's also a huge number of people who just slip past the Border Patrol. We don't know what that number is, but the Border Patrol has this metric called gotaways. And they're people seen on cameras but just never stopped. Now, those numbers are about 5 times on an annualized basis what they were before COVID. They've exploded. It looks like we've had 1.5 million so-called gotaways in just the last 2 fiscal years, many times what it was in the past. And one reason the Border Patrol stops fewer people is they're so busy processing all the border encounters that are flooding the system. Now, why has the administration chose to adopt such policies? A lot of conspiracy ideas or see a big hidden motive, but I think the key reason is that many progressives simply see immigration restrictions as motivated by racial animus, making them illegitimate in their view. Though in public, most officials will still pay lip service to enforcement. Democrats also tend to see immigrants solely as desperate people fleeing desperate circumstances, which is sometimes very true, but not as rational risk takers responding to the incentives the administration has created. While the influx of illegal immigrants has been nothing short of astonishing in recent months, a significant part of the recent growth in the foreign-born post-COVID is legal immigration. My preliminary estimate that of that 4.5 million increase between January 2021 and October of 2023, 2.5 million of it is illegal immigrants, and about 2 million are legal immigrants. Keep in mind, that is not the number of new arrivals by any means. That's just the net increase in the number. The actual number of new arrivals is higher, and of course, there's some undercount, as I had said before, in these numbers. So where are we headed? Well, let's put up figure 7 from the report. What this figure shows is that if present trends continue, we would be setting new numerical and percentage records basically every month. If these trends do continue, the total number of immigrants would reach nearly 60 million and 17.3% of the total U.S. population by the end of a hypothetical second Biden term, and that's what the figure shows. These, of course, are levels unlike anything in American history. Now, look, Congress sets limits on legal immigration and allocates funds to enforce those limits for very good reasons. The current scale of immigration raises both short and long-term issues. Some of the short-term costs we're seeing play out in cities across the country. New York City, for example, is expected to spend $12 billion over the next 3 years on social services for illegal immigrants. The impact, the shorter-term impact, the immediate impact on key public services like hospitals and schools are certainly not trivial, particularly in the communities where these folks are being settled. The second set of concerns are more long-term, and I think these long-term issues is where we need to focus our discussion. Let me just touch on a few because there are a lot, and we don't have that much time. As in the past, the vast majority of immigrants come to America in search of a better life, and the high rates of work among immigrant men reflects that desire. But by increasing the supply of labor, immigration does reduce wages and sometimes crowds out U.S.-born workers, particularly in jobs that require modest levels of education. Now, although the wage impact of immigration was once disputed by immigration advocates, in the post-COVID high inflation world, businesses and their allies began to openly clamor for immigration, specifically to hold down wages, effectively confirming what basic economic theory and prior research had found. The only debate now is reducing the wages of working class Americans good public policy or bad? But everyone kind of agrees that that's what immigration does. Now, perhaps the biggest labor market issue is that in the last half century, the share of less educated men not in the labor force increased dramatically as immigration grew. Now, there's a lot of research on this question. There's a lot of data, but let me just give you one number to think about. Let's exclude teenagers and focus only on U.S.-born men 20 to 64 of working age with no education beyond high school. In 1960, 7% were not in the labor force, which means they're neither working nor looking for work. By the beginning of 2023, it was 25%. So we've seen an explosion of people who don't show up as unemployed, but are working age because they don't say they're actively looking for a job. So there's all these people, millions of them, on the economic sidelines. The total number of people who are of working age is over 50 million who are neither working nor looking for work. But if we look at the less educated, those without a college degree, is where the big deterioration seems to have happened. Now, this rise in non-work, there's a pretty clear consensus, is associated with a host of serious social pathologies, from crime and social isolation to overdose deaths, suicide, and welfare dependency. Now, at a time when businesses are struggling to fill jobs, it may be very tempting to simply argue for immigration or immigrants to fill jobs and just forget about all those on the economic sidelines and all of the economic problems of less educated Americans. But that comes at a cost of allowing these social problems to persist. It is not right to say that immigrants or immigration caused that problem entirely. It probably contributed to it, but it certainly lets us let it go unaddressed. It lets us ignore it. Now, perhaps the most important reason we limit immigration is to facilitate assimilation. And I don't mean by assimilation simply driving on the right side of the road or even learning English or having a job, though those things are important. I mean something deeper. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, himself the son of Jewish immigrants, famously said in 1915 that learning English and American customs is not enough. He believed, quote, "The immigrant is not Americanized unless his interests and affections are deeply rooted here. And we properly demand of the immigrant even more than this," Brandeis said. He must be brought into complete harmony with our ideals and aspirations and cooperate with us for their attainment. Now, few public figures in America today would express such a sentiment. I think one of the main reasons for that is we no longer even agree on what our ideals and aspirations are. In fact, assimilation itself is increasingly seen as a bad word. As Boston College professor Peter Scarry wrote some years ago, assimilation is morbid among many of our elites. That said, I still think it's fair to say that a large share of the public supports the idea of assimilation, including the kind of robust assimilation that Brandeis outlined over 100 years ago. But as my colleague Mark Kokorian has observed on more than one occasion, it's hard to assimilate immigrants when the numbers are so large and they get such mixed messages about what we want from them. Should they retain their cultures? Should they celebrate American history or accomplishments? Or is America an irredeemable, racist, sexist, classist society in need of fundamental transformation? Whether we are talking about labor markets, culture, or the impact on public services and welfare, the most important issue is numbers. Yet as a country, we have great difficulty in discussing this issue. Talking about immigration without talking about numbers is like discussing a budget without ever mentioning what it is you're actually going to be spending. In terms of numbers and their share of the population, America, when it comes to immigration, is headed into uncharted territory. The key question for policymakers and the public is, do we want, as a society, to go there? Thank you.